I call Paul Kohler.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I would like to speak on new clauses 7 and new clauses 8. As the MP for Wimbledon, I'm proud to represent a constituency with such a rich and diverse educational offering, including fantastic primary and secondary schools, both the independent and state sectors. But recent government decisions, including the increase in employers' NI contributions on all schools, removal of business rates relief, position of VAT on school fees at independent schools, are pushing many in both the state and private sector to the brink. The latter changes to independent schools have caused considerable concern in my constituency, as can clearly be seen by the over 1,000 signatures from my constituents on the petition discussed or debated in Westminster Hall today. It is my party's belief that as Liberals, education should not be taxed and individuals should be able to freely make choices about how their children are educated. The ambition should be to reach a point where the state offering of schools is so high that no parent feels particularly compelled to send their children to independent schools. However, these ideologically driven policies of taxing education are not the solution, simply putting further strain on the state sector, whilst also financially hitting those who make what they believe is the best choice for their child. A piece of red meat to show the red flag is still fluttering on those benches opposite. Admittedly, the long-term impact of these changes will have on schools is still to be seen, but the early signs are not good. This academic year, we've already seen a drop in pupils at independent schools of 10,000. Yes, 10,000, 3 times higher than the government estimated. Many believe this will not be a one-off event, but the start of a longer period, with more pupils expected to leave independent schools in the coming years and making any financial gains to improve the state sector illusory. It's important to note that its cost per pupil is likely to be larger than the national average due to the sheer number of students in the independent sector with special educational needs. The Independent Schools Council estimate there are over 130,000 pupils in independent schools with special educational needs, 90,000 of these receiving SEND support with no EHCP. Independent schools in my constituency, such as the Hall, in Wimbledon High School and Donhoe Prep School, to name but 3, do a huge amount to support children with special educational needs, and many parents choose to send their children there for that reason alone. I spoke to many parents who have made tough financial sacrifices to send their children to these schools. They speak of the barriers to their children receiving the support they need in the state sector, including long waiting lists to receive an EHCP. But these changes are already forcing many to reconsider their decision. They simply can no longer afford to use the private sector to relieve pressure on the state system. As is well documented, there are huge issues around the provision of SEND support in state schools, with many children waiting years for support and many schools, due to budget restraints, being unable to provide the support they would like. So at a time when the government and local council are already struggling to support schools with the money they need for SEND support, avoiding further strain on state schools is vital. These decisions are doing the opposite. Turning to new clause 8, may I draw the House to my entry in the Register of Members' Interests. I would now like to speak specifically on the impact this bill will have on the wine industry and the nighttime economy and hospitality in general. Under the current wine easement, 85% of all wine sold in the UK is subject to the same rate of duty. With the alcohol duty now set to be linked to the volume of alcohol in each bottle of wine, that will be replaced by 30 different rates of duty. Whilst I understand the government's broader intentions, this new regime is simply not workable in the context of wine. It fails to account for the fundamental difference between wine and other, more manufactured drinks. The ABV of wine cannot be predicted with precision before or during the winemaking process. The alcohol content is stable only at the point when the wine goes into the bottle. The ABV varies between different years and different vats. Until bottling, we do not know the ABV of a particular bottle. It therefore creates huge uncertainty about price and profit margins for the industry. There are different rates of duty depending on the specific ABV, down to a gradation of 0.1%. It's particularly important with low-cost wines. The point is that this regime is utterly impractical for wine producers and wine merchants. Hal Wilson, the co-founder of Cambridge Wine Merchants, told me, "In my business, This feels like death by 1,000 cuts, or even 2,000 cuts. We sell over 2,000 different wines each year. From February, we'll need to know the precise ABV of each and every one for being able to calculate their full cost. For each 0.1% ABV difference, there's a different amount of tax to be paid. Now, I wrote to the Minister about this and received a long and detailed response, for which I'm grateful. He made the point that HMRC will change its practice, accept the ABV on the label of the bottle, which can be to the nearest 0.5%. But that its current practice is not in the legislation, as I understand it. It is still far too complex, and much of my criticisms still hold. Secondly, his letter fundamentally misunderstands why people drink wine. Wine is consumed primarily for taste, not strength. The ABV affects the taste profile. Compare a light Beaujolais with a robust Rioja. It's all about taste. What about whether it is stronger so one can get more drunk? That is not how people consume wine. Turning briefly to hospitality and the nighttime economy, the industry is facing an existential crisis owing to the cost of living crisis, rising energy prices, inflation, labour shortages following Brexit, changes to commuting patterns, and the more than doubling of business rates. Now is another increase in alcohol duties are to be yet another burden. Every incremental cost makes survival more difficult, as I know myself. And this finance bill shows the government is still not taking the dangers seriously. Thank you.